Hello and welcome to Media7. In this week's program, we'll try and make some sense of the extraordinary media environment around healthcare reform in America and examine the freshly downsized Metro magazine. But first, it cannot have escaped your attention that a citizens-initiated referendum has been conducted on the question, should a smack as part of good parental correction be a criminal offence in New Zealand? The result, a thumping 87% on the turnout of 56% for no. That's not the decision recommended by most newspaper editorials, all frontline child welfare agencies, the large majority of Parliament and the mainstream churches. But before we discuss the meaning of the message, Sarah Daniel has some parental correction.
Joey Salvati says 4 conversations with the Lord in his shower convinced him to create spanking paddles to punish unruly children.
If you do it this way, at least you're getting their attention, but you're not harming them.
The Son of God was also a carpenter, and this guy's here to do God's work. Smacking is a heavenly purpose with earthly implements. Spare the rod and spoil the child. It doesn't actually say that in the Bible, but they are trifling and transitory matters. Parents have been exercising their right to smack through the ages.
I'm not coming down. You'll hit me.
Well, you just better. Why, Beaver, you know we never hit you.
Spanking, smacking, slapping in the name of child discipline keeps the little blighters in line. In the olden days, children were seen and not heard, and when they were heard, they were smacked. Even the threat of a smack was enough to make your eyes water.
And if you don't tell me the truth, I'm going to put you across my knee.
You wait till your father gets home.
It's not that he wants to do it. He's not going to beat you. He's going to smack you.
Back then, even teachers had the right to smack. But that was then, and this is now. And we're still banging on over whether to smack or not to smack. And there's no sign of the sting going out of the debate.
Sarah Daniel's take 2 there. Now, the Prime Minister, who refused to vote on what he described in June as a Dr. Seuss referendum question, has reiterated his stance. There will be no change in the law, just a clarification for police. That wasn't good enough for Family First, which placed the latest in a series of newspaper ads this week. Strong stuff. I'm joined now by referendum backer and Kiwi Party leader Larry Baldock, media commentator and consultant Brian Edwards, and Herald on Sunday reporter Matt Nippert. Welcome to you all, gentlemen. Now, Larry, how effective do you think those ads, the Family First ones like the one we've just seen, were?
Well, throughout the campaign, I think they were effective because they were putting forward real cases of parents that were having either investigations or prosecutions put at their door, and that was something the media seemed to be denying all the way through. So it was important that people could read real cases. And
yeah, they do seem to have been important for that very reason you gave there. You didn't get a lot of joy from the editorial columns of newspapers, did you? No, not a lot. The ads were also useful in the beginning because we put the petition in, of course, and that gave people access to it, and we had a letterbox full of replies. But I think it's been difficult all the way through to actually get clearly established that people are being prosecuted. I don't know how the Prime Minister keeps going on saying, you know, no one's being, he says criminalised, but what he really means is prosecuted. And yet there are clear evidence that that's the case, that the police have simply shifted it into a different category. Why would that be? Why would are we talking about the pre-existing liberal views of most journalists? Do you think that was a factor? Well, that would be your interpretation. I would just say that... I was trying to lure you into saying it, actually, Larry. People obviously have strong views on this issue. I think we do see that people who would have been yes voters were the ones in control of the pen in a lot of the media, and particularly the television. I mean, your little piece there has a certain slant to it. I watched on Prime one time, they had this lunatic woman out of a documentary in Netherlands where she sat at the table and smacked every child's hand as soon as they couldn't answer a question for their homework.
sort of ludicrous images of what most parents do reasonably within their home, what we did in our home with our 3 children. And
but to be fair, it wasn't just the editorial columns going for the no vote. It was the frontline child welfare agencies. It was the Anglican Church. It looked a lot like the establishment, actually. Well, what do you make of that?
Well, it clearly wasn't the Anglican Church, because 87% voted no, but the bishops all signed up to it. Some of the pieces we saw on TV were fairly empty churches where the bishops were presiding. I don't think it's fair to say mainstream Christians were on any side of the debate. The Christians across the country have various views. And when we collected signatures, it was people from everywhere. You know, you'd never say that 87% of the country are all fundamentalist Christians, as the Prime Minister tried to accuse us. This is something that touches ordinary New Zealanders from all walks of life, all faiths. New migrants to this country come with a strong view about how they raise their children.
Now, I have to say one thing that turned off quite a few people was the picture of you in the New Zealand Herald, fist pumping. I think people found that a little bit hard to take. They thought it seemed like an odd thing to be celebrating.
Well, you know, Brad Thorne did the same thing when a penalty was awarded in the last stages of the All Black game. It's sort of a natural reaction just to, you know. And the fact that they then said I was sort of ready to go out and punch some child somewhere is ludicrous. I think that's the problem with the debate. It's been really. Well,
I'll go to Brian now, because I recall you writing in your blog. You had harsh words for that picture of Larry, didn't you?
I mean, to some extent, I agree with Larry. I mean, I think that picture was deliberately chosen by the Herald. They'd have had a whole range of pictures to choose, and I think they deliberately chose that one. What I said in my blog about that event, that celebration of their victory in the referendum, was that I thought they were all sickos. That's what I said. And a lot of people objected to that and said we don't want that sort of language in dealing with this debate. But I actually don't resile from that at all. The picture was very unfair to Larry, I think. But to me, the concept that you would have a celebration, that you would book a hotel, that you'd all get together and you would celebrate, the idea that you had won in a debate which in theory was going to allow you to smack your children or hit your children. I mean, I found that obscene, and I still find that obscene. And so,
do you accept that perhaps you're in the minority for thinking that?
Well, the whole problem here, of course, comes back to the referendum question. If you ask a question like that, it becomes very difficult for people to answer either way, really, you know, because the question really says, should it be a criminal offence to be a good parent? I mean, essentially that's what it says, because it links in the smacking idea to good parental discipline. And once you join those two things together, you've got a real problem.
Actually, I'll put that to Larry. We'll go to Matt Nippert after that. Larry, do you think the result would have been different if the question had been, say, should New Zealand children have the same protections from assault as adults? Would there have been a different result?
Well, I was debating Sue Bradford recently, and she said if the question had been, should parents be allowed to use reasonable force to correct their children, she would have had more confidence in the result. I'd quite happily run it again with that question. I don't think we would have got a different result. The idea that using the word good sort of skewed the question, I don't think bears up at all. Most people understood it and they voted accordingly.
No,
we used the word...
I'm actually going to go to Matt Nippert, who's been sitting here patiently.
That's absolutely not right. To say that the insertion of the word good didn't skew the thing, that's just nonsense.
Well, you see, we used the word
I'm going to Matt. Matt, did you vote?
Yes, actually, I think my wife did for me, but that's right. So I'd prefer not to pass that on to the chief electoral officer.
What did you make of the media coverage? Was it the Liberal elite getting its comeuppance?
Well, it was a very difficult debate to report, because essentially when this issue first arose, this was a sort of a Helen Clark nanny state is sticking its big fist into people's homes and telling them how to raise their children. And this was a common theme throughout the election campaign. And it was a big issue. And at the beginnings of this, when this was going through the House, there was a National on one side and Labour on the other. It was big party politics. Now, of course, when Clark and Key held their joint press conference and buried the hatchet on that, it sort of took the sting out of the debate quite substantially. And finally, when, of course, Labour lost the election, nanny state was not really around. And this referendum came almost as a hangover. And there was essentially one side of the debate, in this case, had left the room. And reporting it, there were only a few groups that you were able to go to to get comment, to argue.
It seems there was a shortage of cause celebs. I mean, Larry, the fact is that there was not a conviction for smacking. There has not been one yet. There was a prosecution that was withdrawn. How did that affect the debate? Because you were reduced to going to people like Jimmy Mason, who I think everyone was embarrassed by in the end.
Well, it was very difficult to find cases. I mean, I think this debate was more symbolic than substantive, actually. Again, the whole nanny-state meme, perhaps. And then, of course, many of the groups involved, I think, had this part of sort of broader social changes they'd like to see. In fact, at the victory party, which I'd like to correct Brian, this wasn't some big lavish party. In fact, it was a windowless room with a cash bar with 40 people.
It was rather pathetic.
But during your victory speech, Larry, I think you called for, I think there needs to be a focus on the real causes of child abuse. You brought up the fact that there needs to be children raised by two biological parents, and you also called for looking at again of sex education to what you call parenting education. And I think these are sort of part of a much sort of broader agenda here, and sort of there are some real themes underlying this debate that haven't really been looked at.
I'd really like to talk to Larry. I'd like to talk to Larry because I've just met him for the first time tonight, and I met his wife, and he seems a really nice guy to me.
Wow.
So I'm sort of bewildered by this. Here's a man who, with his wife, goes all around the country. This is an enormous effort, trying to get signatures for this huge petition. How many? 350,000 people signed this petition and so on. So something is really getting into his guts. Something is really upsetting him. And the thing that is apparently upsetting him is that under the law, he can't hit his children. Now, I can't relate to that. That's so bewildering to me as a concept, that you would put all this energy, all this effort into this referendum in the first place over something that seems to me to be so, I was about to say trivial, but so unworthy, really, that's what this is all about, that people should have the right in this country to hit their children. I wouldn't want to be associated with a referendum like that.
Well, I appreciate, Brian, the compliment that it was a lot of hard work. And to come back to the celebration night, in a sense, that's what we were doing. We were celebrating that a referendum had been held and a result was going to be known. One of the things we wanted to do was give New Zealanders a chance to have their voice heard, and the government had ignored polling. And so a referendum seemed to be a pretty definitive way. It's really disappointing to hear media disregarding it and, you know, the politicians saying, because 44% didn't vote, it's now an irrelevant thing. That's crazy.
I wonder, Larry...
But I will respond to Brian's personal question.
Right.
You see, the problem all along is that I understand how you may feel, and I've certainly debated with Sue Bradford many times, but when you constantly say, you know, we want the right to hit our children, it's not how we see it. I never hit my children. I smacked them, and there's a big difference.
Let's be Larry.
No, but you
Larry,
see, you shake your head.
take you up on this.
There is no difference.
If you look at the latest of the Family First ads, most of that looks to me like abysmal parenting by people who need to stop throwing their children around. There's people throwing kids out of chairs, grabbing them by the shoulders. None of this is smacking.
Well, there are some cases where parents have smacked the child on the knee, on the arm and so on, and have been prosecuted. But the police have put that into the category of minor acts of child discipline. So they can still say there's been no one prosecuted.
What is the purpose of smacking the child? I mean,
it's a way we correct behaviour.
We're not here to relitigate this issue.
I've got 3 children. Barbara and I raised them. We love them dearly. We've got 4 grandchildren. We smack our grandchildren with our children's permission, and they love us and we love them. It's just, it is a big distinction. What we heard more than anything else when we were collecting signatures was people saying, we know the difference between a smack and a beating.
And yet, quite clearly, some of the people who have made cause celebs in the course of this did not know the difference. We've talked about Jimmy Mason, who for 8 months was the ear flick dad. Turned out he punched his son in the face. And he was made a cause celeb. And,
well, I never made him a cause celeb.
No, you have to listen to me on this. I've shown you this email.
Yeah.
This is from the son of the so-called Timaru lady, who herself became a media figure. And I really wonder about the risks of this because what he says is, let me start by firstly saying I left home during high school because of the physical abuse and to have nothing further to do with my mother other than through countless family court hearings of me trying to get my brothers and sisters removed from her care. He went to Family First and said, I am one of this woman's children, it is an abusive household, you need to stop indulging her, and they told him to go away. Are you not concerned by that? They let her be a media figure.
Look, we never made what's called the horsewhip lady a media figure. The yes vote did. Sue Bradford did. As soon as that case...
That's not true.
No, it isn't.
That is not true, Larry.
She
Bob
was called...
McCoskrie flew her up to Auckland to be on his radio show and called her a good parent.
Yeah,
he made her out to be a champion of parenting.
Because we were always trying to overturn the impression that was given. Sue Bradford and other members of Parliament, even though they'd sat at the Select Committee table and that woman had come in and laid on the table the little piece of leather that she had used to discipline her 12-year-old son for kicking a hole in the wall of a school, a hole in the wall of the classroom at school, they constantly went out and said it was a horsewhip. And they used
it was a riding crop, and she used a cane as well.
But yes. They called her the horsewhip lady. They made her...
The point here is that one of her children went to Family First and said, this woman is an abuser.
Look,
I've escaped from this home. And they told him to go away. She was too much used to that.
We needed to debate the real facts of that case. See, a jury listened to that under the old Section 59.
She was acquitted under Section 59 and she would not have been acquitted today.
And so, well, of course not, because you can't do anything today.
And it wasn't smacking, was it?
No.
And this boy,
you can't
I've
do
spoken
anything
to him,
today
this
to correct
boy,
the child.
Is absolutely aghast.
Well, this isn't the boy that was in question, of course. This
isn't the boy that was smacked. It's the older sibling who has tried to rescue his children.
This is a family with considerable dysfunction because of relationship breakdown amongst the adults. This is why we did 2 petitions, Russell. We didn't just do a petition for referendum on the anti-smacking issue. We did one that said the government should get serious about the real causes of family breakdown, family violence and child abuse, because we're still not addressing those issues.
Constantly this belief that there is some magical, clear, bright line between smacking and hitting a child.
Well, absolutely there is. 87% of the country agree with me on that.
Yeah,
that's why they voted no.
But they don't.
Matt,
I need to go to Matt.
What do you make of these people there, please? Right. And that is, there's obviously some sort of division.
Get your own show,
Brian. Some sort of division. When are you prepared to leave? There's obviously some sort of division in your movement in that case, because let's talk about McCroskey. He recently said that because he's one of the leading lights in this movement. And he recently said that he was quite comfortable with the idea of people using the wooden spoon to discipline their children. He's come out with another statement recently, which is even more interesting. And he says that the reason why there's so much violence among children at school these days is because we have abandoned corporal punishment in schools. So the logic of that is that if we brought back corporal punishment in schools, if we caned kids at school, that would prevent them being violent in later life. That's the only logic I can find in that.
No, I'm going to talk to Matt Nippert now. Matt, it strikes me that one thing the Yes side was missing here was a Bob McCoskrie, someone who would pick up the phone and give a quote to a journalist on deadline. Well, he's like Garth McVicker in that respect. He will always have a quote for you. And I wonder whether that was where, in some respects, the Yes vote fell down.
I think the Yes vote fell down because they knew they were on hiding to nothing. I think if you look at the results of all 3 other citizens-initiated referenda we've had since the legislation was passed enabling them, all of them have fallen overwhelmingly on whoever writes the question. We had the firefighters trying to negotiate an industrial dispute at the ballot box. We had the sensible sentencing calling for, hard labour, victims' rights, longer sentences, and I think there was something about restorative justice. I think even Nandor Tanchos voted for that one. And then, of course, we had the referendum combined with an election that we should reduce the number of MPs, which is a really popular call. And it just shows that these referenda tell us very little interesting or illuminating about a debate. The questions seem to be, loaded in light of the organisers. I can understand it's a wonderful publicity tool. And if I was running a political movement, this is the way I would kick it off, because we've had some very small groups, very new groups, and I note that your Kiwi Party was only incorporated last year, Larry. And indeed, Bob McCroskey had only showed up in the Herald twice before the smacking debate. And Focus on the Family's biggest media splash before this was complaining about Hell Pizza's distribution of condoms in their advertising. It's a very strange way for New Zealand to home grow its own religious right.
I'm going to have to let Larry respond to that.
I think if you want to discuss Bob, you should invite him to the show. We're not on the same organisation.
He was a brother in arms.
We worked together on the campaign to collect the signatures. And the role he played was very useful for that, because I was obviously on the side of the street often with my wife collecting signatures. And the people we met there convinced me about what heartland New Zealand believe. And I tell you, Brian, the people we met, some of them, many of them were preschool and primary school teachers who came and signed the petition because they said the level of violence in their classrooms has been increasing. I don't think it's because they're not using corporal punishments, because the children in the homes are not being corrected properly. The idea that we can do this positive parenting is a lot of hard work, and a lot of parents in this country just don't do it very well. And so we're ending up with a generation of kids who are not being disciplined, where a light smack is going to put them in place very quickly, is not abusive. Even our own Otago University said, you know, the study showed it's not harmful. It affects children very positively, and they learn good things from it. And because it's not being done in homes, as we see that smacking is on the decline because it's now illegal, the school teachers are seeing problems.
Right, we are going to have to go. I just will remark that you've said parents don't know the difference, and then you've said parents can't cope with positive parenting, and you're expecting them to know when to stop when they're smacking, and I'm not sure that's the case. But
parenting is a tough job.
We're going to have to go, Larry, and that does actually finally conclude this discussion. Thanks to Larry Baldock, Brian Edwards and Matt Nippert. After the break, into America's medical maelstrom.